Hey everyone, Christina here. I am wrapping up a couple weeks worth of talking about seeds. I have a video on how to choose them, another video on how to test them to see if they're still good. And in the past I did a video about winter sowing, which is a great thing to be doing right now. But today I'm going to talk about storing your seeds so that they have a long lifespan. You can think of this as creating your own seed vault. You may have seen these advertised where companies are selling containers full of vegetable seeds and claiming that they are going to last 25 years or, it's a dubious number in my opinion. I don't think they would really last that long, and I think you'll understand why as we talk about how to do this on your own. But there are some very good reasons to make your own seed vault rather than just going out and buying one. To me, the biggest reason is customization. So when you buy a seed vault from a company, the seeds are kind of generic. They're hoping and praying those seeds are going to grow in your area. But if you live where it's a little colder, pardon me, or the season is shorter, or maybe it's hotter than sort of middle America, likely those seeds aren't going to grow very well for you. And I talk a little bit more about how to choose seeds that are appropriate for your area in my video on how to buy vegetable seeds. I'll put a link in the description. So you can customize your seed vault so that it actually is going to work for you when you want those seeds. More than likely, you're going to save money too. As with a lot of things, you can spend as much as you want on this project, but it does not need to be expensive. And the third bonus is that it's more easy to replenish those seeds, and do in large part because it's going to be less expensive. So right now, this is early February 2021, and a lot of the major, most popular seed suppliers have shut down their websites because they were just overwhelmed with orders. And we found in spring of 2020, they were sold out as well. So doing this adds a little bit of security. It's cheaper. I highly recommend it. Even if you don't think you're going to store your seeds for many, many years, if you just want to keep them until next year, this video is going to show you how to do that and maintain as much of the viability and life in those seeds as possible. So the first step, kind of obviously, is choosing the seeds. You want to make sure, as I said, that you're picking something that's right for your growing area and that's right for your family. If I bought a seed vault, I kind of am on a different diet than a lot of people, and there would be a lot of seeds in there that I wouldn't use because we wouldn't eat them, So you get to pick and choose. What does your family really like? What do they not like? You can leave those things out. What grows well in your area? What is going to be easy to store if you don't have access to, say, canning lids and jars, which also happened in 2020, and there's still a shortage going on. So for example, you might want to grow more winter squash, which you can just put in a cool location. You don't have to do anything to preserve it, and it will last you many, many months. So all these things you can think about when you're selecting your seeds. I also would urge you to lean towards open pollinated varieties, especially if you want to store these seeds for hard times. So open pollinated seeds are seeds that you can collect, they're plants that when they grow, you can collect their seeds, and those seeds will produce plants that are exactly the same variety as what you already grew. Hybrid seeds don't do that. You can collect seeds from hybrid plants, but you're not going to get the same variety. Maybe it's going to be less productive or less tasty, or it's not going to grow as well in your area, not as disease resistant, etc., etc., etc. So if you can find open pollinated varieties that grow well in your area, I would encourage you to choose those for your seed vault. Okay, So if you're buying seeds like I have in here for your seed vault, you don't have to worry about the next step, which is drying your seeds. For everything except freezing your seed vault, we're going to get to that in a minute, just having store-bought seeds, which are already, pre-dried to a certain degree, is going to be just fine. But if you go out and collect seeds, first of all, you want to do it right. I highly recommend the book Seed to Seed by Suzanne Ashworth. It gives really detailed information about the correct way to collect plant seeds. And it includes vegetables as well as other things. Because if you're not doing it the right way, those seeds are going to be less viable. You might end up with hybrid seeds. So you're not getting the right variety, because hybrids can happen in nature just through wind or pollinators. So I highly recommend you start there. There are also some seeds that require fermenting, and all the details are in there. It really kind of goes beyond the scope of this video for me to explain all that. But once you've collected that seed, and if you need to ferment it, you've fermented it, then the next step is drying it. And you have a few options when it comes to drying your seeds. You want to aim for drying them in an atmosphere that's 60 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, you can, in most areas of the United States at least, you could just dry those on your countertop. I recommend you put them on a paper plate or maybe a piece of parchment paper, because if they stick, they'll come right off as they dry. Whereas if you put it on a paper towel, you'll end up with pieces of paper towel on your seed, and that's not really what you're after. And it just takes as long as it takes. Smaller seeds obviously are going to dry faster than big, large seeds, like a pumpkin seed. It might take several weeks to dry. And it also depends upon the humidity in your location, in your house. You can also use an electric dehydrator for that job, but you're going to want to watch it closely, and you're going to want to make sure that the temperature inside the dehydrator is accurate. So I always recommend you want a dehydrator that has a thermostat, but sometimes those thermostats aren't really accurate. So I would recommend that you test it. You put in a thermometer and you just see what it runs at, because you don't want to go above 100 degrees and you don't want to go below 60. You're going to also want to watch it closely, because you don't want to cook your seeds and kill them. We want them dry, but not cooked, okay? Probably the best way, especially if you're going to do things very long-term as seeds will last, or if you want to freeze your seed vault, this is a vital step. You're going to need to get yourself some silica gel, and you can get that online at Amazon, or you could get it probably from a local craft store. It's used for a variety of things, especially like in floral work. And the way you use that is you're going to weigh the seeds that you want to dry on a digital scale. And I would recommend you work with one type of seed at a time. You don't want to mix up your varieties, and you don't want big seeds and small seeds together. And you're going to then measure out an equal amount of your silica gel. And then you're going to just stick the silica gel into a jar. That's not what this is, but you want an airtight container, like a mason jar with a metal lid, not a plastic lid, because that's not airtight. Works. That's probably the easiest thing. So you're going to put your silica gel on the bottom, and then you're going to cut yourself a piece of screening. It needs to not be solid. It needs to have air circulation. A piece of screening, and you're going to put it inside the jar, and then set the seeds on top, and then screw on your lid. And that silica gel is going to absorb the moisture in the seeds. And I would recommend doing that probably for at least 7 days, and for bigger seeds, or if you're going to freeze your seeds, for 14 days. There's no danger, like with an electric food dehydrator, of cooking the seeds. So 14 days should be really good for most things. All right, so let's assume you've got dried seeds, or you have your store-bought seeds that you're ready to store. Your saved seeds that you're collecting yourself and that you've dried, I kind of like to store them in old pill bottles, but you can use paper envelopes. You can buy little envelopes at an office supply store, or you can go online and find templates and print up just on regular paper an envelope, cut it out, tape it together. That works. You want air circulation is the big thing, because if, for example, these were airtight, then humidity could be created in there, and that's not good for your seeds, right? So the big enemies of seed storage are light. You want things generally kept in a dark location, but moisture and temperature are really big. So moisture is probably the hardest thing to get rid of, and make sure your seeds don't get damp, because if they get damp, then they want to germinate. So let's say you live off grid, or you are preparing if you think you might be off grid. What's the best way to store your seeds? Well, it happens to be the way that I am storing seeds right now, and that is simply in an airtight container. I will show you how to do this. It's really simple. All right, this is so easy. Here's how we're going to start. I'm just using dehydrated milk because I have that on hand. You can use desiccant. And I'm going to put about an inch worth in the bottom of this gallon canning jar. And by the way, I replaced that dry milk, dehydrated milk, once a year, and you should do the same thing if you're using desiccant. Then I've got seed packets. These are just store-bought. Same idea though if you're saving them. And I'm just going to put in a few at a time, whatever fits. I have gallon jars just for this purpose. It needs to be an airtight container, so you want to use, if you do use a jar, you don't want it to be plastic, and you don't want it to have a plastic lid, because they're just not going to last as long, because plastic isn't airtight. Trying to do this neatly. There we go. You can fit quite a few seed packets in one of these jars. If you do this at home, or if you already have a different airtight container that you use, I'd be curious to hear about it. Okay, one more. And then I just use the standard canning 2-piece lid. But if you want a 1-piece lid that is sold for mason jars, you can do that too. And there you go. Now the thing is though, where are you storing this? You want to store these in a cool, dry, darkish location. So you, for example, might put it in a cool closet or in your garage. Those would be fine. The coolest place you can find in your house is what you're after. And so these seeds will easily last a year stored that way. I think they'll actually last much longer. So let's talk about that for a moment. So the way you store seeds does certainly affect their longevity, but so does the type of seeds. Some seeds just have a longer life than others. So I have a little cheat sheet here, and let me just tell you, in general, if you store it like I've just showed you how, off grid, here's how long you can expect those seeds to last. So onions and parsnips have a pretty short lifespan typically. They're only going to be good for approximately a year. There's always exceptions, but plan for them to last only about a year. In the 2-year mark, you have corn, chives, leeks, okra, peppers, spinach. 3 years would be asparagus seeds, bean seeds, broccoli, carrots, celery, kohlrabi, peas, rutabaga, and turnips. 4 years would be artichokes, beets, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, chard, eggplant, kale, radish, squash, and watermelon. And probably most melons in general. And then at 5 years, you would have collards, cucumbers, lettuce, and tomatoes, assuming all those seeds are stored, as I've explained, and that if you collected them yourself, you did it correctly. So now the question becomes, how can you make them last even longer if you want to? Because, I know that I certainly don't use all my seeds every year. Some seeds I don't use at all 1 year, and then I decide, I'm going to plant that again the next year, for example, or 2 or 3 years down the road. So how can you make these last even longer? So probably the next step, and a very easy one, is to use the refrigerator. And previously, I have always stored my seeds in the refrigerator, but right now I have a little teeny tiny fridge, and they just don't fit. So I'm making do here. But you are just going to store it just like you would if it was off-grid, but you want to put it towards the back of the fridge. The further back, the better. You don't want them in the door. And the reason is that every time somebody opens and closes that refrigerator, the temperature and humidity sway. They change, even if it's slight. Those changes just, eat away at the seed and make it not last as long. So, in an ideal world, I would have a separate fridge just for seed storage so that my fridge isn't being opened and closed all the time, and those seeds aren't exposed to those fluctuations. That could just be a used fridge, it can be a dorm fridge, one of those cube fridges, whatever works for you. Now, next up would be freezing the seeds. So when you buy a seed vault, typically they are expecting that those seeds are going to be frozen. And indeed, if you look at what seed banks do across the world, they freeze their seeds. But it's tricky to do this at home. A seed bank, they are flash freezing the seeds. They have great temperature controls. They have a backup generator. You probably don't have the ability to do all of those things. So the big thing is, though, that freezer needs to be at -20 to -15 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so that's the first thing. Ideally, again, it's not a freezer that you're opening and closing to get food in and out of because, again, temperature swings. The other big thing is those seeds need to be perfectly dried. If there's any moisture in there at all, it really can wreck, especially certain seeds. So definitely I would use the silica gel method for drying even store-bought seeds before I froze any seeds. And I would put my seeds or my seed packets in like a Ziploc bag and then put them in an airtight container and then put that container in the freezer. Again, ideally, you would have a freezer just for your seeds, if that's possible. I don't know if they make a small freezer that reaches those lower temperatures, but that would be something to look into. Another thing that people talk about is using a freeze dryer. How does that work? I mean, it sounds great because a freeze dryer sucks out all the moisture, right? Seems like it would be a great way to store your seeds. And nowadays, of course, we have consumer grade freeze dryers that are available. Now, I wouldn't buy a freeze dryer just to dry my seeds. I definitely don't recommend that. But if you already have a freeze dryer so that you can really easily store food, and I have a link in the description, there's only one company that sells consumer grade freeze dryers. The commercial ones are really expensive. Then you might want to experiment with this. I've done some research on it and I hear just a lot of different things. People have different experiences. Some people freeze dry their seeds and then the next year they germinate just fine. I really haven't run into anybody who has freeze dried seeds and sat on them for X number of years beyond 1 year. But I have also seen people who said, yeah, I put my seeds in the freeze dryer and they just like turned to dust. So I can't really give tons of advice on that because I haven't tried it myself. I would think that it might depend upon the size of the seed, like little tiny seeds. I think maybe you could over dry, or maybe just it isn't suitable to do those little tiny seeds in the freeze dryer. I would also think that you might have trouble with tiny seeds flying around in there, but give it a try. Or if you've tried it, let me know in the comments how it worked out for you. I'd be really interested to know, and I'm sure other people watching this would too. So if you have stored your seeds any way other than off-grid, not refrigerated, not frozen, you can just take them out when you want them and put them in the garden. If you have frozen your seeds, you can't just pull them out of the freezer and then plant them. You might run into problems doing that. So you really need to pull them out of the freezer and let them thaw for like 24 hours, maybe a little longer depending upon your seeds. And then go ahead and start the seeds either right in the garden or in your containers or however you'd like to do it. So, but this brings upon an issue, doesn't it? Because if you're pulling things out and thawing them, you're shortening their life. So what a lot of people like to do is they'll have one container that's like seeds they would start in the spring, and another container of seeds they would start in like August or July for a winter garden or a fall garden. Ideally, you're just pulling out what you need and not everything, because again, that's going to shorten its life. Really, that's it. Just remember that the enemy of seeds is moisture and temperature. If you refrigerate, if you freeze and do it right, those seeds will last an extended period of time. I'm not going to promise 25 years on that. I think that would be really difficult to do at home without the right equipment. But I certainly have had seeds that I just stored in the refrigerator that lasted a decade or more. So this is how you do it. I know a lot of people like to put their seed packets in like a notebook or a photo album because it seems so neat and tidy and everything. But those seeds aren't going to last nearly as long as if you use one of these methods. If you have any questions at all about seed starting or storing seeds or anything at all related to homesteading, I hope you'll ask below. I answer all the questions. And if you like this video, please subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff. See you next time. Bye.